Metafix is a show that teaches you how to think in the metagame. I am not here to give you the answers, nor am I going to tell you how to win. Metafix teaches you how to play in the metagame and how to react around the metagame and what is in the metagame. If you're looking for the answers, try HC Realms, check the forums, they have all kinds of neat toys and tools and teams being brought up, and check the results of a lot of the ROC tournaments or any Worlds tournaments to see how teams played out and what teams were used for. I'm just here to help you think. The chair seems low compared to my desk chair. Been a while since we've done an episode in the studio kitchen. We're winding down from post states, and we're all kind of excited and relieved that it's all over. It was a really exciting weekend, and thanks to everybody in Ontario who made it possible, and all the lead-up tournaments to get us hyped. That said, it's time to get back into talking about the metagame and where things are going. So last week, we heard me yammer on about the cuts to the metagame. But right now, the metagame hasn't really had a big shift. So what do we get to talk about? We get to talk about things to do in the game while we're playing the game. Things to think about when you're in competition. And the one I want to talk about right now, and technically the title of the show, is that the judge is not your opponent, and your opponent is not your judge. Now, what reason I say this is often in games, because Heroclix has become a versatile game, there's a lot going on with all these special powers, traits, abilities, things are wacky, rules interact with rules, one character does one thing that doesn't quite fit in with another thing. You can look up and stare at the WES all day, but even you're going to miss something after doing all that, and then something changes on you and you have no idea what's going on. So, you got to talk to yourself about, or talk to you guys and myself about, when is it a good time to call the judge? And the immediate answer to that is when you and your opponent can't agree on the rule. Sometimes power interactions are a little weird, and a player won't quite understand it. So you explain to your opponent doesn't get it. That should be the immediate reaction, judge, just to solve the issue, right? Oftentimes when I'm explaining rules to my opponents, if I'm sure of the rule, I'll offer to my opponent, do you want me to call a judge so that we can get this figured out? A judge is often there as quick as they can if you yell and scream and put your hand up. And that's another thing I want to talk about when we're talking about calling the judge, is the best way to call the judge. And that is to raise your hand and yell, "Judge!" They'll skip to your table right away unless they're in the middle of another ruling, in which case they'll hear you and they'll deal with that one. It doesn't take a great deal of time. 50 minutes is a fair bit of time to play this game, and the judge, it's important to make sure all the rulings are accurate. You don't want to leave a game and go, "Oh, this guy did this and I found out later that he wasn't supposed to be able to do that." It's the worst thing in the world. So immediately call the judge. Now, there are certain interactions that you can attempt before calling the judge, and it's the black and white. The powers themselves, the standard powers, are all in the PAC. Whip out a PAC and explain to your opponent, this does this, this does this. If your opponent still has a problem, judge. If it's a rule that you know exists in the rule book and you have the page marked, whip out the rule book and say, there it is right there. And if your opponent still doesn't call it, judge, right? The judge is important to you as part of the game. They're there to make sure that everybody is playing the game correctly and to make sure that the rules are upheld to the game. They're not just there to collect free prizes and stuff. So that's another thing, judges. Just remember, help your opponents, be aware. If you can't keep up with the WES, try to have a mobile device of some sorts handy. Your players aren't allowed to have the mobile devices handy, and they can only print off so many of their own rulings before interactions with their characters come into interactions with other characters that they may not have planned on seeing. So be ready with some kind of either a set of rules that you know, have some kind of mobile device that has an internet connection. A lot of stores have a Wi-Fi connection, so feel free to ask them, hey guys, can I have a Wi-Fi connection just to check up some rules. The WES isn't exactly the most verbose website. You're not going to be sucking bandwidth like a YouTube site. You're just going to be grabbing a couple text-based things there. So don't panic about that. And just explain that if they ask about what are you going to be doing with my internet connection. because our store internet connections, and if they go over an allotted bandwidth sometimes. Anyway, off on a tangent. So remember, guys, it's best before an argument starts at the table to just immediately call the judge. And it happens to me all the time where I will talk to my opponent and I'll say, that's not how that works, when they try to tell me something, and then they'll argue with me, and if we can't seem to see eye to eye immediately, I will call the judge. And that's the best way to handle it, because the judge has to be the one who referees. They are the final word. And that's another thing about it. You kind of have to accept their final word. But if you know for a fact that a rule exists on the WES, please challenge. Explain to them where you saw it. Explain to them how, the search pattern that you used to get it. Because the search is very, very efficient in the fact that you can search for a part, and then within the things that turn up. So like, let's say I'm looking for orange battery. I look up orange battery, bunch of rulings. Let's say I have 70 rulings. Well, that's not going to get me the thing. And then I look up quintessence, just as an example, guys. This is not the hard example, and then all the rulings involving the quintessence and the power battery will show up. And that's just kind of how it works for the judges and how it works for players. So just remember, guys, the judge is your friend. They're there to make sure the game is being played correctly. And you can only know so much going in. If you're mistaken about something, it hurts, but it's something to learn from if it happens. That's this week's episode about dealing with judging and when to call the judge. See you guys next week when we talk more non-game elements. And remember, practice makes your team better. The opinions and thoughts brought to you in Metafix are not meant for the casual game at the table. Married with Clix is brought to you by Majestic's Heroclix sales down Costa Mesa, California. Right now, they're in the middle of storefront change. In the meantime, don't forget to check out their eBay store. If you check the link down below, they always have great Heroclix stuff at fantastic prices, and they'll ship just about anywhere.